Okay, so we are going to be jumping into our second lesson today, which is all about how to express percents and decimals as parts of a whole. So whenever we talk about percents, fractions, or decimals, these are always just parts of a whole. So for example, example 1 says the portion of time that Teddy spends doing homework for each subject is shown in the bar diagram. So when we're thinking about the whole here, the whole is how much time total he's spending doing homework. So that's the entire time. That's our whole. And then it breaks down to 30% of that he spends reading, 3/5 of that he spends doing math, and 0.10 he spends doing science. So these are all parts of one big whole. So now it's asking us how can you write the amount of time Teddy spends on reading or science as a fraction, decimal, and percent. So first it says write 30% as a fraction and as a decimal. So first let's break this down on how we'd write this as a fraction. So whenever we're talking about fractions, we always have our part to our whole. So when we're thinking of percents here, our whole is 100 because a whole percent is 100%, so that's our whole. And then the time he spends reading is 30%. So my part there, my part out of the whole 100% is 30. So my 30% as a fraction is 30 over 100. And then we can also go ahead and simplify that. We can go ahead and divide by 10. So 30 divided by 10 is 3, and then 100 divided by 10 is 10. So 3 over 10 would be my simplified fraction there for 30%. And then let's go ahead and write this as a decimal. So, and this is the first topic that we are going to let you guys use calculators on. So we're going to go ahead and put this into our calculator. 3 divided by 10. And then when we do that in our calculator, we get 0.3. So we have our fraction and we have our decimal. All right, let's go over here and try this. So 0.10 as a fraction, and it wants us to write it as a percent as well. So first, whenever I say decimal, like when we're talking about how to write it as a fraction, I want to think about my whole. And the way I want to do that is think about what decimal place is my number in here. So we have tenths, and then we go up to hundredths. So I know for my fraction, my whole is going to be 100. And then my part to that whole is that 10. So my fraction here is 10 100ths. And then I can go ahead and simplify this. So I can divide by 10. So I can divide by 10 on the top and the bottom. 10 divided by 10 is 1, and 100 divided by 10 is 10. So 1/10. And if we want to write it as a percent, so some of you might already know how to write it as a percent just by looking at this fraction. So if we have this fraction, we have our whole, our 100. So we can just take that 10 and say our percent is 10%. Okay, the other way that you could look at it is whenever you have a decimal, to turn it into a percent, you just have to move the decimal place over to the right 2 times. So if we were to move this over 2 times, you would get 10. And the reason we move it over twice is because we are multiplying by 100. So whenever you have a decimal, to turn it into a percent, you want to multiply by 100 or just move the decimal place over twice, and that gives you your percent as well. So kind of 2 ways there that you can turn your decimal into a percent. All right, so I want you guys to try this one. Anna spends 0.45 of her homework time reading. What is 0.45 as a percent? And then actually I want you guys to go ahead and write as a fraction as well. So I want you guys to write as a fraction and as a percent. So if we're going to turn this into a fraction, I know my part is 45. And my whole there, that 5 is in the tenths, hundredths place. So I'd have 45 over 100. And I want you guys to simplify that. So we could divide by 5. The top and the bottom, we could both are divisible by 5. So we would end up with 45 divided by 5 is 9. And 100 divided by 5 is 20. So I would have my simplified fraction of 9/20. Okay, as a percent. So there's two ways you guys could have looked at it. You could have already said if, I wrote as my fraction, so I know my whole is 100. So my percent there is going to be 45%. You also could have taken our decimal and either multiplied by 100, or which really just moves your decimal place over 2 times. So 1, 2 would have gotten you 45%. All right, let's try another one. So it says that Teddy spends 3/5 of his homework time doing math problems. It wants us to write 3/5 as a decimal and as a percent. So it says the first part here tells us to use division first to find our decimal. So since we are letting you guys use your calculator, I'm not going to make you guys do long division on this. So just go ahead and put this in your calculator. Whenever we have 3/5, we know we're going to do 3 divided by 5. So if we do 3 divided by 5 in our calculator, that's going to get us 0.6. So now that we have our decimal, we should be able to feel pretty confident now turning this into a percent, but it's asking us here to use equivalent rate to find a percent. So to use our equivalent rate, so we have 3/5, and we want to turn this into a percent. So to turn this into a percent, we know what is our whole of a percent. What's our denominator or our whole of our percent going to be? So our whole we know is going to be 100. So what we can do here is think about our last topic when we were talking about ratios and rates. How did we get from 5 to 100? What did we do here? So we actually multiply by 20. And remember from our last topic, whatever we do to the bottom, we're going to do to the top. So we're going to multiply by 20 here. So we have 3 times 20, which is 60, which gives us our fraction of 60 over 100, which now we know, since this is our part, we have 60%. All right, so last one, Teddy's friend Jacob spent, I think that is 5/8. 5/8 of his homework time doing problems. It wants us to write 5/8 as a decimal and as a percent. So first I want you guys to do is I want you to use division to find the decimal. So what would our decimal be here? So if you have 5/8, go ahead and use your calculator. And we would have 0.625. And then it says to use the decimal to find